Tonight you'll sleep in my bed. Human the alien princess's audacious request. The first thing Elia's ward noticed about Vierk's Prime was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy kind that pressed down on the ears. The palace halls were wide and tall, built for beings larger than humans. Smooth black stone reflected cold white light. Alien guards stood perfectly still, their armor shaped like living metal, their eyes glowing faintly. Elias walked between them with steady steps. He was human. That alone made him an oddity here. Humanity had joined the galactic conquered only 3 years earlier. To most species, humans were weak, short-lived, and reckless. Useful for trade, maybe. Not worthy of fear. Definitely not worthy of respect. Elias had been sent as a diplomatic observer, not a decision-maker. His job was simple. Smile, listen, and do not offend anyone powerful. He reminded himself of that as the massive doors to the imperial court opened. Inside, the rulers of the Vierk's Empire sat in a half-circle of floating thrones. Their bodies were tall and elegant, their skin pale silver or deep blue, their eyes sharp with ancient intelligence. At the center sat Princess Salith, heir to the empire. She was younger than the others, but the room bent around her presence. Elias stopped at the marked position and bowed in the human way, hand over chest, head lowered. A few Vierk's whispered to each other. Some looked amused. Others looked annoyed. Salith studied him quietly. He met her gaze without staring. That alone caused a ripple through the court. The High Chancellor began to speak, his voice echoing through the chamber. The human envoy is acknowledged. You will observe, learn, and remain silent unless spoken to. Elias nodded. Understood. The session went on for hours. Trade disputes, border conflicts, political threats wrapped in polite language. Elias listened carefully, storing details away. He noticed patterns. Who interrupted whom? Who avoided eye contact? Who leaned forward when certain names were mentioned? Near the end of the session, Salith raised one long, graceful hand. The room fell silent instantly. She stood, her height making even the tallest nobles shift slightly. Her voice was calm, clear, and carried without effort. Tonight, she said, the human will sleep in my bed. Silence turned into shock, then chaos. Voices erupted. Some shouted in protest. Others hissed in disbelief. A few laughed, thinking it must be a joke. Elias did not move. Inside, his mind raced. He knew enough about Vierk's culture to understand this was not a casual statement. Sharing a sleeping space was a ritual of protection and claim. It was political, dangerous, sometimes fatal. The High Chancellor stammered, "Your Highness, this is highly irregular." Salith turned her head slightly. He stopped speaking at once. Her eyes returned to Elias. "Do you accept human?" Every gaze in the room locked onto him. Elias thought of Earth. Of the fragile position humanity held. Of how every mistake by a human representative echoed louder than anyone else's. He took a slow breath. "I accept," he said. The court exploded again. Salith nodded once, satisfied. "Then it is done." The session ended early. Guards escorted Elias through corridors that seemed longer than before. Whispers followed him like shadows. Some thought he was about to be killed. Some thought he was about to be owned. Some hoped he would fail so humans could be reminded of their place. Elias kept walking. That evening, he was led not to a guest chamber, but to the inner sanctum of the palace. Salith's private quarters were guarded by symbols etched into the walls, old, powerful laws made visible. Inside, the chamber was vast but simple. A single platform dominated the center, layered with soft fabrics and glowing warmth. No decorations, no weapons in sight. Salith entered after him. The doors sealed shut behind her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Elias broke the silence. "With respect, Your Highness." "Why?" She studied him, then gestured for him to sit on the far side of the platform. He did, keeping careful distance. "You know our customs," she said. "Some of them," Elias replied. "Then you know this was not desire." Her tone was firm. It was necessity. She walked to the edge of the room and touched a hidden panel. A faint shimmer appeared in the air, an active security field. "My empire is unstable," Salith said. "Tonight, several factions plan to test my rule. Assassins will strike where they believe I am weakest." Elias understood. "And your laws?" "Ancient," she said. "No one may attack someone under my personal protection while they share my resting space. To do so would unite every house against the attacker." Elias frowned slightly. "So I'm a shield?" "Yes," he nodded. "Why a human?" Salith turned to face him fully. "Because no one would expect you to survive." That was honest. He appreciated that. She continued, "And because if you die, the political cost is acceptable. Tragic but manageable." Elias let out a small breath. "Comforting." She tilted her head. "You are calm." "Humans are good at being calm when things are already bad," he said. Night settled over the palace. The lights dimmed, shifting to a soft glow. Salith lay down on one side of the platform. Elias remained seated for a moment, then carefully lay on the opposite side, fully clothed, hands visible. There was distance between them, clear boundaries. Time passed. Elias did not sleep. He listened. The hum of the building. The faint vibration through the floor. A pause in the rhythm of the air systems that should not have been there. His eyes opened fully. He turned his head slightly and whispered, "Someone is here." Salith's eyes snapped open. She did not move, but her breathing changed. The security field flickered, just for a fraction of a second. Elias rolled off the platform silently. He picked up a small metal ornament from a nearby table. When the air behind him shifted, he swung without hesitation. A cloaked figure collapsed with a sharp gasp. Another shadow moved. Elias shouted, loud and sudden, a raw human sound meant to startle predators. It worked. The second attacker hesitated just long enough for the security field to surge back to full strength, throwing the figure against the wall. Guards flooded the room moments later. When it was over, Salith sat up slowly, staring at Elias as if seeing him for the first time. "You sensed them," she said. "Yes," Elias replied. "You didn't." "We rely on systems," she admitted. "We relied on not being eaten in the dark," he said simply. As the guards removed the attackers, Salith looked at the human beside her. The court had thought this night would break him. Instead, it had just begun to reveal what humans truly were. And somewhere in the palace, far from the light, others were already planning their next move. Morning light spread slowly across Vierk's prime, pale and cold, filtering through the high crystal windows of the palace. The night's events were already being whispered through hidden channels, carried by servants, guards, and silent machines. A human had survived the princess's bed. That alone was enough to unsettle the empire. Elias Ward stood near the window of Salith's chamber, looking down at the endless city below. Towering structures curved like blades and wings, alive with quiet motion. Normally, such a view would have filled him with awe. Today, it filled him with awareness. Behind him, Princess Salith sat calmly while palace medics examined the chamber for hidden threats. Her expression was controlled, but her eyes kept returning to Elias. "You did not sleep," she said. "No," Elias replied. "I wasn't supposed to." She dismissed the medics with a wave of her hand. When they left, the room felt suddenly larger and more private. "You acted without hesitation," she said. "Most beings freeze when surprised." Elias shrugged slightly. "Freezing gets you killed on Earth." Salith considered that. "Our histories speak of humans as fragile." "We are," Elias said honestly. "That's why we learned to notice things early." A chime echoed softly through the chamber, a formal summons. "The Imperial Council has called an emergency session," Salith said. "They want answers." Elias nodded. "They always do after something goes wrong." They walked together through guarded halls. This time, Elias noticed the looks were different, less mocking, more careful. Some guards inclined their heads to him, others watched his hands. Inside the council chamber, tension filled the air like a coming storm. The High Chancellor stood as soon as Salith entered. "Your Highness," he said sharply, "an attack occurred within your sanctum. This is unacceptable." "It is unfortunate," Salith replied calmly, "but not unexpected." All eyes shifted to Elias. "A human stopped trained assassins," one noble said, disbelief clear in his voice. "How?" Elias spoke before Salith could. "They assumed I would sleep." Murmurs spread. He continued, his voice steady. "Predators on my world hunt at night. Humans learned long ago that darkness is not rest, it is danger." The council listened despite themselves. Another noble leaned forward. "You sensed them before our systems." "Yes," Elias said. "The air changed." That caused more unease than comfort. The High Chancellor narrowed his eyes. "Your presence clearly invites chaos." Salith's voice hardened. "No, it reveals it." She stepped forward. "Elias Ward will remain under my protection until the instability within this court is resolved." Shock rippled through the chamber. "Remain?" someone hissed. "For how long?" Salith looked at Elias briefly, then back at the council. "As long as necessary." After the session ended, Salith led Elias through a quieter wing of the palace. For the first time her guard lowered slightly. "You embarrassed them," she said. "I answered honestly," Elias replied. She stopped walking. "That is the same thing." They entered a private observation room overlooking the palace interior. Below, servants moved like careful insects. Above, surveillance lights drifted slowly. "You understand what you represent now," Salith said. "A target?" Elias asked. She allowed a small, sharp smile. "A symbol." The day passed with meetings, reports, and silent evaluations. Elias was tested constantly, asked questions meant to confuse him, offered statements meant to provoke reaction. He stayed calm. By evening, the palace felt tighter, as if holding its breath. That night, Elias returned to Salith's chamber. This time, the door seals felt heavier. "More will come," Elias said quietly. "Yes," Salith replied. "They will try differently." As they prepared to rest, Salith watched Elias remove small items from his pockets, nothing that looked like a weapon, yet he placed each with careful thought. "You plan," she observed. "Always," he said. They lay down again, separated by space but united by awareness. Hours passed. Then Elias felt it, not movement, absence. The faint hum of the security field dipped, not flickered but softened, a smarter approach. "Gas," Elias whispered. Salith's eyes widened. "Impossible, the filters, designed for your biology," Elias finished. "Not mine." He held his breath, rolled, and smashed a panel with his elbow. Alarms screamed as fresh air rushed in. Two figures emerged through the haze, moving slowly, confidently. They were not assassins. They were negotiators. "We offer a quiet solution," one said through a translator. "The human leaves, the princess survives." Elias stood between them and Salith without thinking. "You don't get to choose that," he said. The figures hesitated. Humans were not meant to stand like that. Salith rose behind him, her presence sharp and dangerous. "You entered my chamber," she said coldly. "You have already failed." Guards stormed in moments later. The intruders were taken away, protesting loudly. When silence returned, Salith looked at Elias with something new in her eyes. "You placed yourself between them and me," she said. "That's what partners do," Elias replied. She studied him carefully. "On my world, that act creates obligation." Elias met her gaze. "On mine, it creates trust." The next day, news spread across the Concord. Not official announcements, leaks. A human had predicted assassination attempts. A human had resisted gas designed to kill. A human had stood unarmed between power and threat. By the third day, foreign envoys began requesting meetings, not with Salith but with Elias. He refused them all. "I'm not here to play sides," he told Salith. "I'm here to make sure my people aren't underestimated." She nodded slowly. "They already are not." During a closed council meeting, Salith made a declaration that sent shockwaves through the empire. "By ancient right," she announced, "the human Elias Ward will stand beside me during the Grand Assembly. Cries of outrage followed. "That position is for blood-bound allies," the High Chancellor shouted. Salith's voice cut through the noise. "He earned it in my bedchamber." Silence fell like a blade. Elias felt the weight settle on his shoulders. That night, as they prepared to rest once more, Salith spoke quietly. "You were meant to be bait," she said. "Then a shield." "And now?" Elias asked. She looked at him, truly looked at him. "Now," she said, "you are proof that humans do not survive by strength or fear." Elias lay back, eyes open, listening to the palace breathe. "And what do you survive by?" he asked. Salith answered without hesitation. "By refusing to be small." Far away, forces beyond the Empire took notice. The galaxy was beginning to understand a dangerous truth. Humans were not guests anymore. They were awake. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Viewership Empire had not been this full in over a century. Delegates from dozens of star systems floated or stood in carefully arranged tiers. Some wore armored shells. Others shimmered with energy fields. All of them watched the central platform with sharp attention. Princess Salith entered first. The hall quieted instantly. Then Elias Ward walked beside her. The reaction was immediate. Whispers rushed through the chamber like a sudden wind. Some delegates leaned forward in disbelief. Others pulled back, eyes narrowed. A human had never been allowed this close to the imperial center of power. Elias kept his posture relaxed, his hands visible, his pace unhurried. He had learned something important during the past days. Looking nervous invited predators. They reached the central platform. Salith took her position. Elias stood half a step behind her, exactly where she had instructed. The High Chancellor rose, his expression tightly controlled. "This assembly challenges the presence of the human." Salith did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "By right of shared rest," she said, "Elias Ward has earned the right to stand here." A murmur rolled through the hall. One elder delegate spoke, voice dry and sharp. "That right was never meant for outsiders." Salith turned her gaze slowly. "It was meant for those who survive." Silence followed. The High Chancellor's eyes shifted to Elias. "Human, you are granted a single moment to speak. Choose your words carefully." Elias stepped forward. The sound of his boots echoed more loudly than he expected. Hundreds of eyes locked onto him. Some glowed. Some flickered. Some felt old enough to remember stars being born. He took a breath. "I won't speak long," Elias said. "I know you think humans are reckless, weak, and temporary." A few delegates nodded without shame. "You are not wrong," he continued calmly. "We are smaller. We break easier, we don't live as long." That caught their attention. "But we notice patterns fast," Elias said, "because if we didn't, we went extinct." A projection flared to life beside him, not a weapon. Data. Images of Earth's history appeared, harsh climates. Predator attacks, collapsing civilizations. "We didn't dominate our world by force," Elias said. "We survived it by learning." He let the projection fade. "You see instability in this empire," he continued. "You see threats and plots. Humans see something else." "What?" demanded a delegate. "Warning signs," Elias said simply. The High Chancellor snorted. "And you believe your species can teach us stability?" "No," Elias replied. "I believe we can help you see what you're ignoring." The room grew tense. Suddenly, Elias' eyes narrowed. He felt it again, not danger, expectation. "Princess," Elias said quietly without turning, "someone here plans to make a point." Salith stiffened. The High Chancellor smiled thinly. "This assembly is secure." Elias shook his head slightly. "Not an attack, a demonstration." A delegate on the upper tier rose suddenly, energy crackling around their form. "This has gone far enough," the being shouted. "The human is a distraction." Energy surged. Elias moved before anyone else. He grabbed Salith's wrist and pulled her down as a blast of light tore through the air where her head had been a second earlier. The blast shattered a decorative column instead. Guards reacted instantly. Shields snapped up. The attacker was restrained in moments. The hall erupted in chaos. When calm returned, Salith stood slowly, her expression unreadable. Elias released her wrist and stepped back, letting the guards do their work. The High Chancellor's face had gone pale. "You predicted that," Salith said quietly. "Yes," Elias replied. "The delegate stopped listening 3 sentences ago." That statement spread through the hall like poison. Salith raised her hand. Silence followed. "This assembly will hear the rest of the human's words," she said. No one argued. Elias stepped forward again. "That wasn't an assassination attempt," he said. "It was a test to see how you would react." He looked around the hall. "You rely on systems, ranks, and old rules. Humans rely on behavior." A delegate asked cautiously, "And what do you see now?" Elias did not hesitate. "Fear of change." Some bristled. Others looked thoughtful. Salith turned to face the assembly fully. "Elias Ward has saved my life twice. He has exposed weaknesses no one here wished to admit." The High Chancellor spoke again, more carefully this time. "What do you want, human?" Elias met his gaze. "Nothing you don't already claim to value. Fair recognition, honest partnership, and the chance for humanity to stand without being crushed for it." The hall was silent for a long moment. Then one elder delegate spoke softly. "If humans are so dangerous, why do they not demand power?" Elias smiled faintly. "Because we learned long ago that borrowed power disappears when fear fades." Salith felt something shift. After the assembly adjourned, the palace buzzed with controlled chaos. Alliances recalculated. Messages flew across secure channels. In a private chamber, Salith faced Elias alone. "You humiliated them," she said. "They tried to use me as a symbol," Elias replied. "I showed them what kind." She studied him. "You spoke as if you were already equal." "I acted like it," he said. "That's how humans survive hierarchies." Salith was quiet for a long time. "Tonight," she said finally, "you will sleep in my chamber again." Elias raised an eyebrow slightly. "Still for protection?" Salith considered the question. "Yes," she said. But not only that. That night the palace felt different, less hostile, more alert. Elias lay awake as usual, listening. Salith spoke into the quiet. "I once believed strength meant control." "And now?" Elias asked. "I think," she said slowly, "it means knowing when not to use it." Elias smiled in the darkness. Far beyond Vierk's prime, rival powers watched the assembly recordings in silence. A human had stood in the center of an empire and changed its rhythm. The final question was no longer whether humans were dangerous. It was whether the galaxy was ready for them. The warning arrived before the sunrise. It came through every channel at once, official, unofficial, and hidden. A coordinated transmission, broadcast across the galactic concord. Elias Ward read it in silence while standing beside the tall window of Salith's chamber. Ultimatum. Salith stood behind him, her hands clasped tightly. "They move faster than expected," she said. "They always do when fear replaces curiosity," Elias replied. By midday, the palace was sealed. Fleets repositioned in distant orbits. Advisors argued in hurried whispers. The High Chancellor demanded emergency powers. Salith refused them all. Instead, she summoned the Grand Assembly again. This time the hall was tense in a different way. No curiosity, no disbelief, only calculation. Delegates watched Elias as if he were a loaded weapon that no one fully understood. The High Chancellor spoke first. "The rival coalition demands the humans' removal. They claim his presence destabilizes galactic order." Salith rose slowly. "Galactic order that survives only by crushing new voices is not order, it is fear." A delegate snapped back. "You would risk war for one human." Salith did not answer immediately. She looked at Elias. He nodded once. She turned back to the hall. "No. I would risk war for what he represents." Murmurs spread. Elias stepped forward. "I will not hide behind this empire," he said clearly, "and I will not be traded to preserve comfort." A delegate sneered. "You have no fleet, no political weight." "What leverage do you think you have?" Elias raised one finger. Perspective. With a gesture, the hall screens activated. Data flowed, clean, simple, undeniable. Human strategic models, asymmetric defense theories. Survival doctrines built from centuries of fighting stronger enemies and winning without conquering them. We don't win by overpowering, Elias said. We win by lasting longer than your mistakes. The hall went quiet. These doctrines, Elias continued, are free, not sold. Shared because humans don't want clients. We want partners who think. The rival coalition's observers shifted uncomfortably. One asked sharply, "And if we reject this?" Elias met their gaze. "Then you'll fight an enemy that learns faster every time you try." Salith felt the shift then, fear changing sides. The High Chancellor spoke slowly now. This knowledge, it could change war itself. "Yes," Elias said, "that's why we didn't share it until now." The rival coalition withdrew its ultimatum within the hour. No apology. Just silence. The galaxy understood what had happened. Humanity had not threatened anyone. They had offered something more dangerous. Options. That evening, Salith addressed her empire. "Humanity is hereby recognized as a founding ally," she declared, "not a protected species. Not a subordinate one." The announcement rippled across the stars. Elias stood beside her, not behind. Later that night, the palace finally felt calm. For the first time since his arrival, Elias slept. Not deeply, but enough. When he woke, the light was soft and steady. Salith stood near the window, watching ships realign into peaceful patterns. "You could leave now," she said quietly. "Your mission is complete." "Yes," Elias replied, "but not finished." She turned to him. "You changed everything." "No," Elias said. "We just stopped pretending to be small." He gathered his things, preparing to move to official diplomatic quarters. Salith watched him, then spoke. "You were invited to my chamber for protection," she said. "Then you became my shield." "And now?" Elias asked gently. She met his eyes without rank or title between them. "Now," she said, "you are my equal." She paused, then added, "Stay, not because of law, not because of danger." "Because you want me to," Elias finished. She nodded. Elias set his bag down. Across the galaxy, the story spread. Not of an alien princess and a human in her bed, but of a moment when power chose trust over fear. The galaxy learned a final lesson that night. Humans do not conquer thrones. They sit beside them, awake, watching, and ready.